Hey everyone, this is Jay, and I have something I wanted to mention. Regular listeners know that once a year I have a new teacher training group. The next group starts this coming fall. But regular listeners have also heard me talk about how the training is not based on a linear curriculum. And the beauty of that is that it also allows for the option for someone to start anytime. It's the same training, same 12 months long, same live group sessions and classes and on-demand materials. You join the group at any time at half the regular price. This offer is going to be open until August 15th when registration opens for the next fall group. But until August 15th, you can start anytime at half the regular price. To find out more, go to jbrownyoga.com/training. And as a way to elaborate on what it would be like to start the teacher training at any time and whether or not it might make sense for someone like you, I took this opportunity to record a mini talk with someone who knows firsthand. Her name is Jennifer. Hello, Jennifer.
How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself?
Good.
Well, I'm really glad to have this moment with you. Thanks for doing it.
Yeah. Oh, I'm excited. I'm so happy to talk about the class. It's been wonderful.
Really? Well, I'm glad you say that. I seem to like things were going well. And as I think I mentioned to you when you first started doing the training, there's like a sort of special significance for me because there's like a full circle feeling around you being in the training because I know you from regular in-person attendance in my classes like a decade ago or whatever it was.
Yeah. Yeah. 2 decades ago.
2 decades ago. Oh my gosh. And I guess I don't know if I was still in Brooklyn doing in-person trainings, whether you would have actually ended up ever doing a training with me. But because it's online now, here we are all this time later. And then that face from that long ago in this new kind of realm that I'm teaching in, like I said, it's kind of had this like circle moment for me. So it's been great having you around.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's so nice to hear. But it really, absolutely for me, and it's true. If it hadn't been this online class, I would not have taken it. You used to teach yoga teacher trainings back at the studio, and it was just never something that I had thought about doing. So this has really been so fortuitous and just wonderful.
Well, also, I don't even know, it kind of what I was going to go to with you is because I was doing a more conventional teacher training at that time, which would involve like a more linear curriculum idea and like a certain very specified time commitment, like you'd have to be there at certain times or you couldn't do it, And the online medium allows for much more flexibility. And I guess what's also interesting for me is that you are one of the first people who kind of jumped into the training, not necessarily with a group starting in January. And we've been having this conversation as the training's been going on and watching how it happens that from what I've seen, I don't know that it really matters as much as people sometimes think it does. So you jumping in when you did it feel awkward? Was it easy to join in with a group that was going, even though you didn't start at the same time as them?
I was nervous at first, but I think part of that too is because I wasn't sure if I was sort of qualified to be there because I'm not a yoga teacher and I just wanted to deepen my practice. And so when I joined the class late, I was sort of like, what am I getting myself into? And I'm also an introvert. And so I sort of had that feeling of everybody knows each other already and I don't know anyone. It sort of felt like moving, elementary school in the middle of the year, I thought. But all of my preconceptions were wrong. And so A, everyone was incredibly welcoming. B, I think also what I discovered is that this entire course is obviously wonderful for people who are yoga teachers already, because I see how much the teachers in the class have gotten out of it. But I also think that this class is for anyone who is thinking about how yoga fits into the context of their lives. And I had been spending so much time thinking about that already, especially with the pandemic and my practice becoming so much more important to myself. And so I think that that's really what this class has given me.
Well, I'm so glad to hear that. And what's interesting to me is about the first part, when you were talking about kind of coming in late, which I didn't even think of it as late, because the truth is, if someone comes into the training right now, they're going to think of you that same way. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, they're going to be like, oh, Jennifer already knows everybody. Like, they will assume you started at the same time as everybody else, even though you didn't.
Right.
You see what I mean? Because like the way it is online, it's an asynchronous world.
Right.
So it kind of doesn't matter as much as we might think it does. Because even people who start at the beginning of the year, they don't come to, it's a whole year. You know what I mean? Like a lot happens in someone's life in a year.
Right, exactly. And that's what I started to discover too, is that people will come to some things, not others. People would be there some weeks. Then, months in, I would start to see a new face, and I would be like, oh, okay, yeah, this is fine. And, and also as we were learning things, people were discovering different things about themselves. And so it wasn't like they were able to discover different things about themselves because they started in January. It was because we were talking about something that really impacted them in a big way, And so, yeah, absolutely. I started to realize, oh, it doesn't matter that I started when I started.
Exactly. And I guess the other thing that you said that I'm glad to hear is there is this thing of people who just want to study more and don't necessarily have designs on being a teacher. And sometimes that changes, but there is potentially, because it's like a year-long thing and it's 500 hours, like a little bit of an intimidation factor for someone who's not already a teacher or who hasn't already done trainings. And to me, there's really no difference. Like the same thing that you would do if you had never done a training is the same thing that you would do if you wanted to have more training. To me, like the process of learning yoga is the process of yoga teacher training. So it kind of doesn't matter. And I guess hearing you and seeing you like coming into the training for study purposes, from what I gather, it did feel pretty accessible to you. It didn't feel like it was something out of your reach, even though you're not, like you said, a yoga person or something.
Right. I mean, not at all. Especially because the videos that you send out every week are distilling so much information and providing so much food for thought. So I've learned so much from the videos that allows me to participate in the conversation. And I've just learned so much more that has led me in a path of, getting books and doing reading on my own. And so the amount that I know now is just so much more than I knew when I started, even though I've been practicing, not regular. I've been practicing regularly for almost 3 years now, but I've been practicing for over 20 years.
I know. I remember practicing with you 20 years ago.
Right. So yeah, whenever it was that you were at that community center in the East Village is when I started practicing with you. And so, yeah, so it's not like yoga was brand new to me, but so much outside of my practice was new. So, so that's what has also been so wonderful, is that I have been able, it has felt really luxurious to think so much about yoga for this long, and then to be able to talk about it with other people thinking about it all the time too. It's wonderful to find this community that is so open to these discussions.
Oh, that's so great. I'm so glad it feels that way to you. That is absolutely my intention. And I guess the last thing is that you said fitting it into your life. I guess I'm curious about that. Like, what's the takeaway for you right now? I know you've got more to do, but what's the biggest takeaway for you so far in terms of like your personal yoga, or why, like you said, why you joined it? Because you want a deeper study.
Right. And so, I want to be able to articulate this well, because I think I'm still learning. And I guess really what it is it has given me a foundation to learn from. When the class is over, I don't think that my understanding will be over, or my understanding of where this all fits into the context of my life will be over. I'm feeling of like this was a first step into integrating this into my life fully, because I think I used to think of it as a practice that I used to do, maybe once a week, when I would go to your studio, and then, after 6 months would go by, and then I'd take time off and get involved in other things and then come back. But once it really became a daily practice for me, I started to realize it's also not just a daily practice of an hour in the morning. There's a lot more going on. And so I think it has allowed me to really integrate it fully into my life and start to understand what that means.
Well, Jennifer, again, it's such a joy for me to have you around, and that it is serving that role for you. Like I said, we still have some more to do, and I have a feeling there's more for us together in it.
Yeah.
But again, thank you so much, and thank you for this little chat, and I'll be seeing you soon, okay?
All right. That sounds great. And thank you so much. And thank you again for this whole class. Thank you for when I emailed you and was sort of like, is this a crazy idea for me to join? It felt a little capricious in the moment to reach out to you and say, does this even make any sense? And I was so thrilled when you wrote back and said, yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense for you to join this class. So you have given me so much. Always. You've given me so much for, the last 20 years, but this last year has really been a wonderful experience. So I cannot thank you enough for it.
You're so welcome, Jennifer. I'll see you soon, okay?
Okay. Have a great evening.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. Here we are. This is Jay Brown Yoga Talks podcast. My name is Jay Brown. And maybe for a moment, within reason, depending on what you're in the middle of, you could stop. You could just take a moment right now to stop and notice your immediate environment, the sound of it, the smell of it, the sight of it. Just take it in. Are you inside in a room? That's fine. Notice the interior of the room. Maybe if there's a window, notice the sense of outside that might be coming through it. If you're outside, definitely just take a moment. Just take in the feel of this moment. Okay. I just wanted us to start there. Is that okay? Welcome if you're new, and to everybody else, thank you. Thank you for returning. Thank you for showing up if it's your first time. I'm glad for people to be listening. I have been really focused these days for myself on this exercise of feeling into the environment, preferably like outside environment, but it can be inside too, doesn't matter. I think of it as really like a counterpose to all the screens, like instead of complaining about how dystopian everything is and how much I'm addicted to the screens, maybe it's better that I find little meditations or little activities or things that I can do that seem to provide my system what it needs rather than focusing on the thing that I don't want, So I've been trying to do that more. I've been trying to open up my lenses a little bit and try to learn some new things, That always can open up new neural pathways. But actually, this is kind of a side note. Maybe I'll talk about it on the other side of today's talk, but I don't know how your weekend went, how the last few days for you went. This is a Sunday before this goes out. And I was supposed to have this like really nice staycation where my wife and my two daughters, they went to my in-laws for the holiday. And my wife said that I didn't have to go. She's like, if you don't want to, you don't have to go. I was like, Daddy doesn't have to go? So it meant that I was going to be home and have all this time, and I had all these ideas of things that I might do with that time. I was very excited about it. And then things did not go well. You see, the day they left, one of our cats went missing. And the circumstances were very mysterious, and I basically had this major trauma experience all weekend long. It worked out, I'm happy to say, but it was not without considerable ordeal. I don't know if there was just like something in the stars or if something about it was Good Friday when it all unfolded. I don't know if there was something going on, but it was intense and it totally derailed any plans that I might have had. But like I said, if you want to stick around to the other side, I'll tell you what happened. And I'm just mentioning it that if anybody else had a weird couple of days, you weren't the only one. All right, well, what else? What else is today on the show, I do something that I used to do more often. I haven't done it in a while, where I find dual purpose for the show, which is I utilize the fact that I have this show to reconnect with someone from my past who I haven't spoken to in a very long time. Usually it's because that person is doing something now that relates to something that's been going on with me. And the fact that it's someone I knew from so long ago who's doing something now that I want to hear about seems like a wonderful dual reason to bring them on the show. And my guest today is a perfect example of this. Her name is Bashira Muhammad. And as you'll hear, Bashira participated in a teacher training I did like over 12 years ago or something. And she was the youngest person to ever participate in my teacher training. And I remember going through a whole debate in my mind about it because, most of the people in the training were, of similar age to me, 20s and 30s, but she was like 15 years old. And I had this whole conversation with my wife about it. It was a whole thing. So she's somebody who made a really strong impression on me. And we talk about it and why I ended up deciding to have her in the training. But I think that some of those reasons why I was so impressed with her back then and why I thought it might be okay for her to do it even though she was so young is also what led to what she's doing now, which is mycology. And I've just been reading all these different things about fungi. I don't know if you've seen that in the news recently. There's been these random news stories about like dangerous fungi, like as a potential thing that we would need to be concerned about. But then there's also all of these incredible properties to fungi and mushrooms, and they're really unique phenomena in nature. And I've just been really thinking about, again, the environment and wanting to tune into our ecosystems, both like internally and externally. So it was a wonderful little bit of synchronicity that put Bashira back into my radar. And it was great to reconnect with her and learn about some of this stuff. I'm very happy to share that with you today. All right. I think that is going to be it. Like I said, I'm going to touch base with you on the other side, but we'll go ahead and get to it. Let's go ahead and listen to this conversation that I had with Bashira Muhammad.
Hello?
Hello.
Bashira.
Great to hear your voice. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Listen, I'm already recording and I want us to feel like we've just begun. Is that okay?
Yes, indeed.
All right. Well, it is amazing to hear your voice too. It's been a very long time.
Yes, indeed.
And it's one of my favorite things that I do with the show, which is every once in a while I've reached out to someone I know from like a former life. And I talk to them out of nowhere and I reconnect with them after many, many years. And this is one of those occasions. And it's not just because I wanted to like reconnect with you, but a couple of things converged. One thing is that I've been talking a lot about animism on the show. I don't know if you've ever heard that term before, about
everything having life.
Everything being alive. And I've been really intrigued by a guy named Josh Schrei, who does this great podcast called the Emerald Podcast, and he talks a lot about it. And then, I had read some stuff about mycology, and there's that book that came out not so long ago about The Secret Life of Trees or something like that. I can't remember what the exact title was. And so I've been intrigued. And then out of nowhere, I don't go on social media very often, but I think something was posted about you. And I was like, oh my God, Bashira. And that you had this like mycology business that you were doing or whatever, that you were like a mushroom farmer. And I was like, what?
I'm curious about that. What did you see? Do you remember?
I'm trying to remember. I don't know. I think it might have just been something you posted because you were something like you had gone to you were at some farmer's market or something. I don't really remember what the post was.
It might have been the Pennsylvania, what my mom posted. She took some videos in Pennsylvania. That was really fun.
See, that's interesting because I live in Pennsylvania now. So maybe the algorithm put that there because I live in Pennsylvania or something. I don't know. But
where in Pennsylvania are you?
I moved to Easton, Pennsylvania.
Oh, I've heard of that town.
Yeah, I moved here back in 2017. And maybe just for anybody who might listen to this, we should clue them into how we know each other, because it is actually relevant to the show. Because, I had the yoga center in Brooklyn for 10 years. And within that period, I did teacher trainings, I think pretty much consistently twice a year for maybe 8 or almost 9, somewhere between 8 and 9 of those years. So I would say in total, over the whole time that I was doing teacher training in Brooklyn, somewhere around, maybe I would guess, like 200 people participated over those years. And of all those people, you were the youngest person by far. And I'm trying to remember, were you 16 years old or 17 years old? I can't remember. Do you?
I think I was 15 or 16. And that class honestly set such a strong foundation for what I do today. It really did. It set a strong foundation for me as a teenager. It set a strong foundation for me, like, to be in community with people. I didn't know everyone's age, but I think maybe everyone was like 20s and 30s. Mm-hmm. And that was so valuable to me, to be immersed in people who were in like a much more mature time of life. And we're all learning about our bodies together, other people's bodies, health, movement. And yeah, it was really amazing.
Well, you were even younger than I thought, because you were in high school at the time, right?
Yes, indeed.
And I I remember that I would do a thing if someone came in and inquired about the training, I would recommend that they would come to the class and I would like talk with them after class. And I remember we did that. And I remember saying to my wife that you were more impressive than a lot of the more whatever adults who were inquiring. And I was like, she seems really sharp to me. I mean, she seemed really self-motivated, which the training was a lot about that. You had to be self-motivated, you know?
Absolutely.
And I remember, I don't know if I said that it had to happen or your mom just wanted to make sure. I met your mom. I remember your mom coming and meeting her. Was that part of the deal for you to be able to do it?
My mom is really awesome. She's always I was an only child for the first 15 or 18 years, depending on how you look at it. And I always had the privilege of independence and choice and being seen and heard. So even as a child, my interest in nature was very seen and heard. So I was doing yoga before I think it aligned heavily with the time that I started your program, that I was doing yoga 10 hours a day in the summertime at home. And I don't exactly remember if it was before or after, but I know it was it definitely overlapped. And so I was pretty serious about it. And I think my mom and family saw and supported that.
See, I remember now, you had been doing all this self-practice on your own. Do you have any idea about where that came from? Were there a lot of people around you who did yoga, or what was it that propelled you to spend that much time at that young an age? Because when I was that age, I was definitely not doing yoga. So do you have any idea about why you were attracted to it at such a young age?
No, but I have a funny story. My uncle told me that he and my family thought I was an alien.
What?
Just in a silly way.
Yeah.
I know they said they still saw and heard me for who I was and respected it, but it was kind of different from the life around me. No one was exactly doing yoga. My aunt was always into fitness and health, and we used to exercise at the park and eat really good food. But yoga, I don't know. It's same with tea. It's just been there since I was born. I think my mom might have shown me pictures. I do remember actually some of the poses we would rest in were natural sleeping poses. Mm-hmm. So I think that's true. Maybe even for people outside, people beyond me too. Some of these poses are in our nature.
I think that's true. You always had a very innate and natural into the yoga practice. And I guess I remember also my impression was that you were really there just to learn. You had you had real curiosity, and it wasn't you were coming to become a yoga teacher. I mean, it's funny, just the other day I actually saw a headline and it said something about the youngest yoga teacher ever, the Guinness Book World of Records has officially registered the youngest certified yoga teacher is this young girl in India. She's 7 years old. And I was like, what was the youngest girl that I was Bashira was, I think 16 or 17. But I think for me at the time, it felt okay to me to have you there, even though, like you said, you were 15 and we were in our 30s.
It was amazing.
Because you really lived up. You were there in a very present way, and you were inquiring in the way that I would hope someone would. So I said, well, does the age matter? And it didn't. It was very cool.
Love that. And now I'm 27, and I have a 9-year-old brother, so I feel like, I learned so many valuable things. I remember at the end of the program, we went to all have dinner together at the Mexican restaurant. That was so delicious.
Yes.
And it was just a great time. Like those relationships, I'm still connected with some of our classmates or some of your students and on Facebook. So it was super awesome.
Well, that's awesome. And so I didn't get the impression, like you were doing a lot of different things at the time. If I remember, you weren't like finishing the training and becoming a teacher. How did you get from doing that yoga to getting into mycology? How did that happen?
Yeah. So
I mean, first you got to finish high school, right?
I know.
You got to finish high school, and then you go to, what happens after high school? Do you go to college, or what do you do after high school?
So I graduated high school in 2013, and I went to William Patterson in New Jersey, where I learned about the National Student Exchange Program. I actually knew about it when I was going in there, and that's part of why I chose the school. And I learned in studying geography that Oregon was the second most sustainable state in the country. I always wanted to have a career in sustainable development, and so I flew to Oregon at 19, and while I was there, a mycologist, a mushroom or fungal scientist, came to the university to talk about how fungi can save the planet. And I was like, this is why I came here. This is like what I want to do forever.
I read about that. What was his name? Paul Stamets? Was that his name?
Yes, indeed. That was Paul Stamets. He wrote this book, Mycelium Running, and was really talking about a lot of the things in there in this presentation. And that was just the most inspiring. I actually took a 5-year gap from college after that, just to expose myself to as many types of mycology as possible, to learn how to farm fungi and mushrooms and do an.
Wait a second. So what was it about the lecture? What did he say? I read something that had to do with like fungi and bees. What was it about the lecture that so inspired you?
I think the biggest was the application of mycology towards soil remediation. So, soil health is like the foundation of much of life, like maybe all life. And, I just recognize that and wanna, we have to preserve the soil, and
we aren't very good about it right now.
Yeah.
We do a lot of things to not keep the soil healthy, do we?
Exactly.
Yeah.
As far as agriculture, industry, there's a lot of threats to soil health. So fungi make soil, they can clean soil, they can clean toxins like oils or metals, heavy metals, or biological pathogens, all kinds of things. So, I found that fascinating. I always loved science, so that definitely helped. And then I think I started recently connecting the dots between like the Ayurveda and food and movement and medicine. And I think that kind of was a bridge between all these different time periods and interests in life.
Wait a second. You jumped ahead. That's interesting. It's coming back around together. I'm curious first to hear more about learning about mycology. You listed off all these things that they do, but when you say that, like, what does that involve? Does that involve you going into the forest and finding mushrooms growing out? Like, how do you learn about farming mushrooms? Isn't the same thing as like foraging mushrooms, is it?
Correct. Yeah. There's a difference. There's a big difference. So foraging is like field mycology. So I actually almost went to graduate school for field mycology, which is the identification of wild mushrooms. But cultivating mushrooms is like a completely different art and science. It involves sterile techniques, working in the lab. I actually have my own lab at my last fungi farm, and it Am I on the right track with answering your question?
Yes, you're exactly on the right track.
Okay, coolios.
So fungi farms aren't necessarily like fields, they're indoors. Is that what you're saying? They're like labs?
It's a lab. I do live still on it looks like a more natural farm. I just moved to a town called Springfield, Oregon, and it is a forested property. There's a river. I can find mushrooms in nature, but growing them is a pretty controlled process.
And so in order to grow a mushroom, what are the elements? What do you have to have? Like certain parts, nitrogen, certain part. What does it take to grow a mushroom?
Yeah, so it takes gas exchange. Mushrooms need to breathe just like us. They need to breathe in oxygen, and they need to respire the CO2.
So wait, let's just stop and take that in for a second, because I read that. I don't know that everybody knows that, but mushrooms breathe.
Yes, indeed. Some mushrooms take deep breaths. Some mushrooms take little smaller breaths. But yes, you need to monitor their gas exchange.
And is that how you would know? Like, you can't see them breathing, you just measure the gas exchange?
You can kind of see the results of their breaths. You can see if oyster mushroom is getting enough oxygen, it'll be nice and full, and it'll be thick and larger. If it's not getting enough oxygen, it will be very chewy. It will be smaller and kind of shriveled in. So it makes a physical difference.
I see. And so the mushrooms that you're growing, those are for eating or for medicinal purposes, or it's all the same thing?
Well, mushrooms do represent this beautiful bridge between or showing food as medicine. So that's definitely part of it. But I grow mushrooms or fungi, which is broader than mushrooms, for sustainability. So I've grown some pest management species, so an insect attacking fungus, which is not for food or medicine. It actually attacks ticks, and the spores get the ticks and kills them, which ticks can cause some health issues, and it's not pretty to experience them. So one person came to me, she's having a major tick infestation. She's like, I used to buy this fungus to help, but they stopped producing it. Can you grow it? And I did. That fungus is known as
there's a fungus that kills fleas, and I know a couple of people who got Lyme disease. So what would you do? You just where would you put it to kill the around your property, or how would you do it?
Yeah, you want to sprinkle around the buildings, entry points, areas that this lady was a farmer, so she was producing meat from rabbits and honeybees. So not meat from honeybees, but she was also raising bees. And to protect them, she would sprinkle the spores of this fungus in those areas on the soil where the fungus lives.
And that would reduce the tick population around her property. Is that the deal?
Absolutely.
Wow. That's wild. And would you see it growing on the ground, or is it underneath the soil?
So mycelium, for the most part, is microscopic, but it does form miles and miles of material in these little tiny areas. So when that happens, it is visible, but for the most part, you don't generally see the activity.
That's crazy. So wait a second. So you grow spores in a lab or whatever, and then somebody goes to a property and sprinkles them around, and you can't see them because they're microscopic? Or can you see what you're sprinkling? And then they grow in a microscopic way under the soil, so you would never even see that it's growing?
You do see the spores that I'm collecting or gather, or what would be the word, germinating in one area. So they're all grown in a container, and then that is where the sprinkling happens from. So okay, how do I say this? Spores in large amounts are visible. You just need to clump them together or get a whole bunch and then you can see them. Or you can look under a microscope and look at one at a time. But they're visible in large quantities.
Mm.
So you can see what you're sprinkling, but once it's in the ground, it's going microbe.
Microbes on the microbe level, because that's what it said in that book. Like that's how the trees communicate, right? Through like this network of mycelium underneath the soil. Is that kind of what we're talking about? Like that's the way it grows, right?
That is a really great question, and it gets at the fact that there's many ways to categorize fungi. So there's many ways to categorize fungi. So I was talking about a parasitic fungus or an entomopathogenic fungus more specifically. But there's other categories. There's saprophytes, the decomposers. There's mycorrhizal fungi, which you just mentioned, which are the mutualists. Are you familiar with...
The mutualists? Did you say the mutualists?
Yes, indeed. I was just going to ask if you are familiar with ecology, or if I should define mutualist.
I mean, I know the word mutual, but I don't think I know it in ecological terms. Please explain.
Okay, so a mutualistic organism is also known as like a symbiont. Symbiont, I think, is different from like a symbiotic relationship. A symbiont, I think, is a little bit different from a mutualist in that it's more of a spectrum. So some organisms can go between parasitic and decomposers, and that's like a symbiosis. So mutualism is a type of symbiosis where both parties benefit from the interaction.
Right. See, we talked about that in the teacher training we did about mutuality. I don't know if you remember. That was like a big topic in the teacher training about mutuality between male, female polarities and stuff like that. So that concept of both benefiting.
Wow. Yes, indeed. I've done summer camps for kids and taught them all about the science of mycology. And that's something that we spent some time on too, interdependence and mutual relationships. And mycorrhizal fungi are a great example of that. They have these very special and fine-tuned relationships with the roots of plants. And they actually were the roots before roots existed, and they're part of the reason we have land plants. Well, they are the reason we have land plants. No, it's always a communal thing, but yeah, they're pretty special. They are outside of my like specialty. Right. I mostly work with the decomposer fungi, but I have worked with pathogens in a plant pathology lab. I worked with the parasitic.
Well, what's that one? What do you say when you say pathogens? That's fungi that kill viruses and stuff, or what are we talking about?
Those are fungi that cause disease or not viruses, but they cause disease. Sometimes they'll cause death, but they are. You've probably experienced them. If you have, I mean, maybe it depends how clean you are. I have like bread rotting sometimes, or fruit sometimes start decaying.
If you leave it in the cupboard for a little too long, because nobody wants that end piece of the bread, right? Nobody wants the heel. Sometimes it gets left in there a little too long. Okay, so that's the what kind of fungi is that? It's
a pathogenic fungus. Like, for example, botrytis, I think it's Cinerea or Cisnerea, is a pathogenic fungus that grows on grapes, all kinds of agricultural plants. So they cause disease in plants for the most part. And yeah, fungi, they're a whole kingdom of life. So there's not just one type. Just like in the kingdom of Animalia, we have whales and we have tigers and we have humans and we have ducks. There's that much variety in the fungi kingdom.
Yes, I've heard that. It's its own world, and it seems like you've been quite enmeshed in it.
Yes, indeed. Since 2014, I got started pretty much like as soon as college started with my mycology career.
I like that you said it. Mycology career. But that's so funny because your mycology career, I mean, did it start with that program you said, like you, that student exchange program? Is that what,
Yep.
is that, did you end up getting that?
Yeah, I went there. You had to have a really great GPA, so I got like straight A's the first two terms of college, and I was well on my way. I honestly didn't really know what to expect when I was getting on the plane and everything. I had never been to the West Coast. I definitely never went to Oregon. I didn't really even look at pictures. I was just like reading about their energy practices, like where the natural resources come from, how much national parks and federal land there was, protected landscapes, how much cultural awareness there was for the environment. So yeah.
In the program, were you just finishing out your school in Oregon now? Is that the deal?
I graduated last spring, since I took that 5-year gap in the middle. So I went back in 2019, and it was amazing to go back and, finish what I started. But when I went back, the school year, this was just before the pandemic. So we were able to do like all the meet and greet. It's a really small school. So, you get to really know all of your classmates, peers, and teachers very well. So we had the first term back, I went and kayaked the Smith River, which was an 8-hour kayaking trip. And then the river was going through the redwoods. We found mushrooms there. So that was like the perfect way to get back acquainted with school.
Mm. So wait a second. So you said you took a 5-year gap. In that 5 years, you were just growing mushrooms. What were you doing for the 5 years?
The first year I lived at the mushroom farm. That was 2015, I believe. Then I went and lived at a National Historic Site, which was actually FDR's home. And while I was living there, his family still lives there today, by the way.
Wow.
We see them sometimes, but I was on the greenhouse, grounds, and garden management team, which was a small team of 4 or 5 sometimes. And it was a 1,600-acre property, so I was helping to maintain that landscape. It was on the Hudson River. It was a beautiful time, and I learned so much. I read like a lot of books and mushroom farming textbooks, mycology textbooks. From there, I'm trying to remember what happened. It was 20...
I have here you started out Zoom Out Mycology in 2017. That's your own thing?
That's a pretty big deal. That was January 1st. I started Zoom Out Mycology, and that was in New Jersey still, but in the spring and summer I moved to the West Coast again, and then I started the farm in 2019, the fungi farm I was describing to you.
Yeah.
So those are some of the, and also when I started the farm is when I went back to school. So that was a little bit of the 5-year timeline.
I see. So you got some like grassroots experience because you started Zoom Out Mycology and you already kind of had a thing, and then you just went to finish your degree, it seems like, right?
Absolutely. I had a great deal of experience. But by the time I went back to school, I learned that research was the thing I wanted to really do within mycology. So when I was back as a student, I was able to like be so focused on this is essential information. I mean, it's all helpful, especially if you love to learn, like you can, and you like to apply information, you can make use of most things that people are willing to share with you. But that was the experience.
Well, I'm wondering, I keep seeing all of this like mushroom coffees and like medicinal mushroom teas. And you make that stuff, right? You make teas. Is that right? Did I see that?
I do make teas. I have 5 different blends with 4 different medicinal mushrooms, 2 blends with reishi mushroom, 1 with lion's mane, 1 with maitake, and 1 with cordyceps. They're all medicinal mushrooms. And like I mentioned, they do represent this beautiful connection point between food and medicine. But sometimes medicinal.
If you are hearing this message, then you're listening to the free version of J. Brown Yoga Talks. To hear the rest of our conversation, please subscribe to Podcast Premium at jbrownyoga.com/premium.